G'day mates, I'm Miles and I'm non-binary. Alright, disclaimer. This video is going to be talking about non-binary. Non-binary is an umbrella term and it involves things like agender, genderqueer, and some people who just feel like they don't have gender at all. It's a lot of things for a lot of people. What I'm going to be talking about is more what it is for me. So this doesn't mean everybody is the same. Now there's going to be talk of pronouns. There's also neopronouns, which are not ones that I use myself. So I'm not going to touch on them in this video. Maybe in a future video I'll do some research about it. But for now, it's not something I feel comfortable talking about. Throughout the video, I may shorten non-binary to NB. Now, NB, the letters for non-binary, we often actually turn into ENBY for NB, and it's just kind of an easier way of saying non-binary. It's just in our vernacular. Okay, let's get down to definitions. What is non-binary? To understand what non-binary is, first you've got to understand what we mean when we say binary. So binary is actually the male and female genders. And so if you class yourself as non-binary, it's when you don't feel part of that. And that can be gender fluid, that can be no gender, it's a lot of things, but it's basically saying I don't feel like a man or a woman. And another thing that's important to know is not all non-binary people are trans.
Miles here, just going through the editing and realized I need to explain this more clearly. So, trans is short for transgender, which means identifying as a gender other than the one you were assigned at birth. So, it's just the opposite of cisgender. So, technically, if you're non binary, you are trans. However, not all NBs feel comfortable with the trans label. That is what I meant, but I definitely didn't explain that properly. Okay, you can go back to your regularly scheduled programming now.
For me, I identify as trans, masculine, non-binary. So I am comfortable with he, him pronouns and presenting as masculine. But I also prefer they, them pronouns, and I want to have the opportunity to explore some feminine things. And basically, it's about, for me, it's the erasure of it having to be a masculine or feminine thing. It's just an interest I have and something that I want to do. And the way I look, the way I present myself, doesn't invalidate how I feel on the inside. And what I feel on the inside isn't completely male. And that's why I identify as non binary. When we talk about gender, it's hard to get away from gender roles. And we all know the image of the feminine mothering woman who, is does the housework, raises the kids, and the masculine man who goes to work, a hard job, and is, stoic. These are just representations and roles that we have assigned to genders throughout the ages. And we're kind of breaking that down a little bit now that, women are actually allowed to vote, are allowed to work, are allowed to be more than just mothers. And so non-binary is kind of just, for me, it's a smashing of what the roles are. For me, there's no roles. In a way, gender is just a construct that we have built up that on top of, whatever genitals we're born with. And, there's people who are intersex, who are born with indeterminate genitals, and sometimes doctors push parents into choosing a gender for their child and giving them operations as newborns so that they then have determinate genitals. And one, that's absolute bullshit, and two, just if somebody's intersex, they're intersex. That's just how they are. There's nothing wrong with them. And the way we present or whatever genitals we have is our own business. Like, shouldn't be in our pants, man. Historically, there has been more than two genders. Before colonialism, there have been places that observed a third, fourth, even a fifth gender. And colonialism really was very rigid on the two gender thing, and it destroyed a lot of, you know, indigenous ways of life. Like, it's only now that things like Two-Spirit, which is indigenous people of Canada and the USA, like, so North America, are actually being able to represent themselves as themselves and not having to assign themselves to the rigid, you know, gender that society puts on them. And they're able to be who they are, something that has been part of their culture for centuries. So before I even had the idea to do a video about non-binary, I had ordered a book online, and when I ordered it, it was just it was a story about a woman who finds out that she's asexual and aromantic. Cool book. I love the story. It's called Loveless. I will have a picture of it here and the author's name that I can't remember right this minute. In the recommended books that came up was this book, which is Queer There and Everywhere, which is an amazing book for anything queer. It covers trans people, it covers homosexual, bisexual, and non-binary. It covers so much. It's such a good book, and it talks about 23 influential people in queer history. Okay, so in this book, I found two people that, although they did not have the terminology at the time, could be considered non-binary in this day and age. First person is actually Christina Vasa. Now, they were born into the Swedish royal family. Now, first things first, I shall quote from the book about why they're using the pronouns they. They was not used during Christina's time, but we've used this gender-neutral pronoun for Christina because they were vocal about not feeling entirely female. So they were born female, they didn't feel entirely female, they talked about this through their whole life, and they were amazing. Like, when they eventually became the Queen of Sweden, they put through a lot of educational reform, especially for women, and they eventually escaped from that life and, you know, dressed as a man as they were fleeing to then go and live a life of freedom of solitude elsewhere. The second historical figure that I'm going to talk about is Mercedes de Acosta. So she actually ended up sleeping her way through old Hollywood's A-list. So that's pretty good. She is a very interesting woman, had a very interesting childhood. When she was young, she showed some masculine traits, and her mother actually cut her hair short and let her dress like a boy. And it wasn't until there was an altercation, she grew up in New York, where basically she was on a playground with some other kids, and this one boy pulled his pants down, showed his penis, and she was terrified, didn't know what it was, because everybody was making fun of her as not being man enough. Like, you know, as how old was she? She was only 7 at the time. Basically went home and was actually told by her mum that her name wasn't actually Raphael, her name was actually Mercedes, that, you know, she was actually a girl. And after some pressure, her mother then started dressing her as a girl again. And so that kind of confused her throughout her life, as it would if, you know, I think if she had more understanding, if her mum had more understanding, if things weren't reversed, maybe things would have been different. I don't know. Now, I'm using she pronouns because that's what she used throughout her whole life. Although there is an interesting quote from her that I shall read. I am not a boy and I am not a girl. Or maybe I am both. I don't know. And because I don't know, I'll never fit in anywhere and I'll be lonely all my life. That really resonates as somebody who has felt like that pretty much all their lives. Like, and it's taken finding a community of queer people, like-minded people who in person and on the internet to actually feel like I do have a place in this world. I do have somewhere I fit in. And I feel maybe if she had been born at a different time, it would have been easier for her. But, you know, she ended up going to a convent. Yeah, basically, when her mum got terrified of the fact that she had dressed her daughter as a boy and wanted to reverse it all, she ended up sending her to a convent to learn how to be feminine. And so she kind of went through that and then got out of that and started becoming, what did she become? Well, she basically became a writer and, you know, worked with a lot of people in Hollywood and slept with a lot of them. Like, she had a fun time, basically. You know, men, women, it didn't really matter to her. But it's important for us to know who these people are. More so for people like me who didn't really have that representation growing up. So I did feel completely alone, completely just odd, strange, queer even. And because of that, I've had my wife help me do some research on people of today who are non-binary. Okay, so you may not know all of these people, you may know some of them. These are people who are, you know, identify as NB, genderqueer, gender fluid. So first we have Caitlin Alexander, who is a lovely YouTuber. We have Asia Kate Dillon, who played Brandy Epps in Orange is the New Black. Tommy Dorfman, an actor who played Ryan Shaver in 13 Reasons Why. I never got around to watching that one. Olivia Hewson, actor and playwright, played Abby Hammond in Santa Clarita Diet. Amazing. I loved them. Bridget Lundy Payne, actor, played Casey Gardner on Atypical. Oh yeah, awesome person. I've seen that show. Again, apologies if I'm butchering any of these names. I'm terrible. Okay, Rose Ariana McGowan, actress, activist, author, director, and singer. Also was Paige in Charmed. And look at them now! Gorgeous! Okay. India Adriana Moore, actor model, played Angel Evangelista in Prose. You may know that, I don't. Sam Smith, of course. They're amazing. They're a singer. They're fantastic. I love them. Amanda Stenberg, actor and singer, played Rue in the Hunger Games. Oh my god, Rue? Sorry, my wife helped me a lot with the research for this video, so some of these are a surprise to me as well. Okay, we also have Noella Stevenson, so cartoonist and animator, producer and creator of She-Ra, amazing. Rebecca Ree Sugar, animator, director, screenwriter, producer, and singer-songwriter. The creator of Steven Universe, you know, the gay space rocks. Okay, we've also got Rebecca Edison Taylor Klaus, actor who plays Sin on Arrow. Jonathan Van Ness, hairdresser, podcaster, television personality, and of course on Queer Eye, amazing, love them. Sarah Elena Ramirez, Grey's Anatomy, they are amazing. I loved them when I watched Grey's Anatomy when I was young, thought I was a girl, in love with them. We also have Miley Cyrus. They identify as gender fluid, something that I didn't know until my wife did research for me. Courtney Act, Australian drag queen, was, I can't remember which season of RuPaul's Drag Race, but ended up second place. They almost won. They identify as genderqueer. I'm using they, them because not all of them said what their pronouns were, so I'm just neutralizing it. Cara Delevingne, they identify as gender fluid. They're amazing. Grimes identifies as gender neutral. I've never actually listened to their music, but you know, Grimes, married to Elon Musk, had the baby whose name nobody knows how to pronounce. Ezra Miller played Patrick in Perks of Being a Wallflower, identifies as gender fluid. Ruby Rose identifies as gender fluid. I didn't know that, but fuck yeah. Jacob Tobiah voiced Double Trouble in She-Ra, identifies as genderqueer. And the last one I have, but it of course isn't the least because there is so many people. I have Lachlan Watson, who played Theo in The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, who they identify as genderqueer. There are a lot more though. These are just some that you may know, and this is more to show you that this isn't something that the internet made up for fun, for clout, for whatever. These are real people, and their identities shouldn't be invalidated by sticking them in this binary of man or woman. There's so much more to them than what meets the eye, and they're just expressing who they are, and who they are is extraordinary and is more than what the world wants them to be at times. Now, one thing that I missed out that is very important to me is Star Trek. The newest Star Trek, I think it's on Netflix, going into season 3, is having a trans character and a non-binary character that are actually being played by queer people, which is something that is finally happening in the real world. Is we're actually getting to play who we our like people, and not having cis-het people playing us, which is cool. So playing the transgender character in Star Trek will be Ian Alexander. Blue Del Barrio will be playing the NB character, and I'm pretty sure that they identify as non-binary as well. And that's just so cool. Like, you just gotta know how cool that is. Like, representation, guys. Just, I love it. All right, it just means a lot, because even though Star Trek isn't really my thing, there's gonna be, you know, kids that are just gonna be able to see that they are normal, that there's nothing wrong with them, that they exist. Especially Star Trek, which is supposed to be the future where there's no wars anymore, there's, no need to fight for resources or whatever, that everybody is able to exist and cohabitate. And that it's, taken this long to get visible, queer characters. Like there was, I think, in a very old episode, uh, there's, you see in the background a guy walking around in one of their dress uniforms. And that's the closest we have gotten to representation in the Star Trek universe. And that's just not enough. And now we're having real representation. And that's just awesome. That was my explanation of non binary. It's not completely conclusive or, covers everything under the umbrella term of non binary, but I hope that by showing you some of these non binary people talking about the the past and the present, it can help you, and just, knowing that there's nothing wrong with straying from the binary of man and woman, and that there's nothing wrong with me for transitioning masculine and still liking things that are seen as feminine. It's part of it is breaking traditional gender roles, and that's cool. Look, if you like the video, like it. Comment down below who you are, what your pronouns are, and just, be kind to each other. I'm Miles. I'm trans masculine, non binary, and this has been my video.